Okay, today is May the 9th, 2024. My students, my wonderful students, Earl, the fifth grader, very talented. He's going to recite this wonderful poetry by the Nobel Prize winner, and he was a Harvard teacher. He's a Nobel Prize earning poet, and Harvard Magazine wrote an article about the poetry. So Earl is going to present this whole article and also this wonderful poetry here. And enjoy. Go ahead, Earl. The floor is yours.
Seamus Heaney was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1995. He was teaching at Harvard that year as he had been, one way or another, since 1979. Today, bluff and kind at 73, Heaney will be back at Harvard on hand from Dublin to read a poem at morning exercises as Harvard celebrates its 375th anniversary. He will reprise his 1986 Villanelle for anniversary, composed for the university's 350th anniversary. The Villanelle relies on the rhetorical power of repetition. In this case, alternate rhyming refrains lifted from the first stanza. There's a kind of bell-ringing quality to the Villanelle, as said Heaney in a transatlantic interview, which makes it easy on the ear. The 19-line anniversary poem has two repeated lines. The first is, "A spirit moved. John Harvard walked the yard." The second reads, "The books stood open and the gates unbarred." Heaney remembered writing just 2 poems during his years at Harvard, semesters when he taught and read a lot. "I tended to regard the Harvard stint as a kind of executive moment in life," he said. "Your public self was on." The 2 poems were the anniversary Villanelle and the alphabet, composed for the Phi Beta Kappa literary exercises in 1984. Traditionally, the Phi Beta Kappa poem is about learning, he said. So mine was about making the first letters at primary school. An early line starts. There he draws smoke with chalk the whole first week, then draws the forked stick we call a Y. This is writing. Alphabet is a tribute to reverie, childhood, longing, and to graduate learning. Over time, letters on the slate became boyhood Latin and then became a poet's alphabet of the real, a new calligraphy that felt like home. The letters of this alphabet were trees. The capitals were orchids in full bloom. The lines of script, like Gruyère's, coiled in dishes. Heaney has read the anniversary poem a few times since 1986, but only once to 20,000 people. The repeating lines make the Villanelle handy for reading over loudspeakers. He said, "If you're going to read a poem in the open air over large speakers to large crowds, make sure it's very clear." Heaney began teaching at Harvard as a visiting professor in 1979. He was elected Bolston Professor of Rhetoric and Oratory during 1984 and 1995, and eased into a final Harvard rhythm as a Ralph Waldo Emerson Poet in Residence, a post he held until 2006. During all his part-time residences at Harvard, he lived in Adams' house. The arts and bohemia were represented there, he said. It was a desired address. Every semester, long visit began the same way, said Heaney. Go straight to Adams' house, set up, and then go straight to bookshops. Then he always stopped at One Potato, Two Potato, a modest restaurant on Massachusetts Avenue that is no longer there. Then there was that Heaney's fondly recalled physical Harvard. I still remember the excitement of driving along Storrow Drive and seeing the outlines of the houses, he said, which was a kind of moment I would remember always. Some evenings, Heaney would slip away to smoke a cigar outside April House on Pillamont Street. and he enjoyed a few quiet corners at Harvard. The library at Adams House, for one, and the Woodbury Poetry Room. It was quite easy to sit down, said Heaney of the library hideaway, and doze off even. Then there was Harvard Yard itself, he said. It was both the inspiration of the Villanelle and as a former cow yard, a place that evoked his own country boyhood in Northern Ireland. I don't know where the gates came from, he said of inspirations for his anniversary, Villanelle, but I definitely know this, that the word yard is very characteristic of Harvard as Harvard, but from my point of view goes very far back into infancy, to the farmyard. You know, the word has a complete world and a complete charge and almost a complete anthropology. Along the way, Heaney read that founder John Harvard was the son of a butcher, the one with ties to Shakespeare's Stratford upon Avon. The yard really was a yard in those days, said the poet of Harvard's 17th century. So I felt at home with John Harvard in a special way. And commencements belonging to a university for a span of time gives you a little history of your own, and a place with friends, said Heaney. It gives you some kind of latitude and longitude for memory. And commencements belonging to a university for a span of time gives you a little history of your own, and a place and a time with friends. It gives you some kind of latitude and longitude for memory. I'm going to read the poem now. A spirit moved. John Harvard walked the yard. The atom lay unsplit, the west unwon. The book stood open and the gates unbarred. The naps dreamt on like moondust. Nothing stirred. The future was a verb in hibernation. A spirit moved. John Harvard walked the yard. Before the classic style, before the clapboard, all through the small hours of an origin, the book stood open and the gate unbarred. The night passage of a migratory bird, wingflap, gownflap like a homing pigeon, a spirit moved. John Harvard walked the yard. Was that his soul? Look, sped to its reward by graceful works, a shooting star, an omen. The book stood open and the gate unbarred. Begin again where frost and tests were hard. Find yourself or founder. Here, imagine a spirit moves. John Harvard walks the yard. The books stand open and the gates unbarred.
Okay, my students did a wonderful job today. Everybody gave Earl applause. He's not perfect. He's far from perfect. You know why? Because we only learned this poetry today. You never heard about this kind of poetry, and he's wonderful. He's not perfect. He's only 10 times better than me. And I'm 10 times better than some of my students, right? Congratulations, 我这小同学非常好。今天早晨我们才学习这首伟大的诺贝尔奖获得者的诗歌。这个老先生在哈佛 on and off 教了20年书，对哈佛非常有感情。作为一个爱尔兰诗人，他把对哈佛的情感和对学生的期待写在了这首诗里。感谢朋友们的观看，为我的学生而骄傲。